very welcome to my channel. Roisin here, and today I'm going to share a little bit of northern Spain with you in ink and watercolour.
In 2019, I spent a few days in Santiago de Compostela teaching a couple of workshops as part of Compostela Ilustrada, which means illustrated Compostela. So I spent a few days there and it was great fun and worked with a super bunch. I was invited by Gemma, who works in a publishing company called El Partido Editorial up in Santiago de Compostela in northern Spain. And I was there with some fantastic teachers. I was with Maru Godas. I was with a few other people. We had a lovely time. And as a kind of a follow-on from that, Gemma decided that it would be a really good idea to get some of the artists who'd been involved with that to do some more work along the Camino Inglés, painting it, drawing it, talking about it, recording their experiences and so on. And then of course March 2020 came along and nobody could do anything at all. So the project had to be put on hold. August 2021 came around and Maru Godas, one of the artists of the Compostela Ilustrada, and myself were invited back to go and draw and sketch the Camino Inglés in whichever way we saw fit. My approach is to use ink and watercolour, and we would both travel the Camino Inglés, and mostly in a car because otherwise we'd never have time to sketch what we saw. And we would stop for a couple of hours all along the Camino Inglés in different little towns that we passed along the way. We had the most lovely week. It was roasting hot, which apparently is highly unusual for El Camino and for Galicia in general, and El Camino in particular. It's always very, very rainy there. So we were very, very lucky with the weather, and I don't think we ever had to stop work because of weather. I unfortunately had a tooth out the week before and was assured that it would be fine, and there was very, very low chance of things going wrong. But anybody who's had a tooth out when things did go wrong, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I had to go on antibiotics for the first few days of the trip, and they were really strong antibiotics. They were the types that you give to alcoholics, because apparently really bad things happen if you take alcohol and take these particular drugs. So I was kept away from the booze for the first few days, but that didn't stop us having the crack. And Gemma and Maru's fella Ramón, absolutely fabulous bunch of people, and Gemma's friend Maria, absolute angel. So we really spent a really gorgeous week of fabulous eating and fabulous company. I mean, it's one of those jobs that doesn't come around very often, but when you're lucky enough to get an invitation to do something like this, you grab it with both hands. So what I'm going to do today is show you a few of my sketches that were the result of that week. As I say, all done start to finish on location, and I saw some really gorgeous places. And I would say to you, I would counsel you, if you're thinking of booking a holiday in northern Spain, you won't do much better than the Camino Inglés, because I believe it's a little bit quieter than the Camino Francés. Is that the name of the other one? But it's maybe it was because we were still in pandemic times when we were there. But it was gorgeous. It had a very strongly Spanish flavour. There wasn't that much foreign travel at the time. So we were treated to a uniquely monocultural sort of Galician experience, and it was fabulous. I'm very grateful for the invitation. So I hope you enjoy these paintings, and I hope you enjoy, more importantly, I hope you enjoy the feeling perhaps of visiting the Camino Inglés through my eyes, and I hope it tempts you to pay a visit yourself someday.
I had been in Santiago de Compostela before in November of 2019, and I loved drawing those streets with their archways that line the streets. You can see there's a dip in the middle of the road to take the runoff of the water. It's a gorgeous looking city. All the woodwork and metalwork and all the rest of it is painted dark green, and my husband Marcel suggested to me that maybe the mayor owns a dark green paint factory. The guy on the right, he was a modern guy on his laptop and so on, but he could have been straight out of the Middle Ages with his slicked back hair and his curly moustache and his little beard and so on. A couple enjoying a beer under the arches on a pouring wet day again at that time in November. It just did not stop raining. In fact, on the way home from this sketch, my green paint was still wet, and you can see that the rain worked its magic, if you like, on the green door and left it covered in paints in rain splatters, which I suppose has a charm of its own and makes me remember the heavy rain of that night. This one was from another visit to Santiago de Compostela. It's the fountain opposite the Museo de Peregrinos, where I gave a workshop one afternoon. Another sketch made between showers, really enjoying the architecture and the galerías, the windows that stick out from the upper floors of the buildings. Grabbing the shadows while I could, because you just never know when it's going to rain. 4 girls having a little beer under some more arches, totally ignoring my presence, weren't one bit bothered about me drawing them. Well, Santiago de Compostela is steeped in religious history, and this is the monastery in the town. So back to August 2021, and the first place we stopped on our week-long trip. This is A Coruna, as they say in Galician, or La Coruna, and it is the Iglesia de Santiago in La Coruna. The next morning we sketched the Marina in La Coruna, and I got to tell you, when I saw all those galerías sticking out in front of the famous the buildings along the Marina, I just thought, how am I going to do this? I am just not going to be able to do this. And I felt so pressurised because we even had a cameraman behind us filming us for Spanish telly. I was okay with the red boats. The traditional boats were a pleasure to sketch, and I was more on, I suppose, familiar territory with those. But my goodness, with those galerías, I just thought I've got to do them the way they are or I won't get the effect. And I just kept thinking, how am I going to do this? And eventually I worked out a way. In the afternoon, I was technically free, but myself and Maria, Gemma's friend, we went off and we had a nice coffee, and the two of us sketched side by side these umbrellas and all the people sitting on the terrace. It was the first time I saw someone get up and leave a table outdoors when they wanted to smoke, which Maria said was perfectly normal and reasonable behaviour, but I was very impressed and I thought it was very sort of civilised. I hadn't seen that before. The next day dawned bright and sunny, and we headed off to Ferrol, which is a town on the coast up at the north of the country, and it's fallen on hard times in recent years. There was a big crash and people's homes lost a lot of their value. So you see a lot of guys sort of wandering around without any work, but it's a gorgeous little town and it has a very nice vibe. This is the marina, and it is called Puerto de Cruceras de Ferrol, which I've probably butchered the pronunciation, but never mind. Now, I wasn't bananas about sketching the modern yachts in the background, but I loved drawing the traditional boats in the foreground with their lovely colours, simple browns, and of course the lovely stark white. Then the blue was perfect to add the shadows of the sunshine. And what was lovely about it was there was a bunch of kids walking behind me who were out on a school outing with their teacher, and they were staring at what I was doing, and one of them pipes up. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, and he says, "Oh my goodness, I'd say your materials are really expensive." And I said, "Yeah, they are actually." And I thought that was very precocious of the little lad. And then he also said, "You are the best artist I've ever seen in my whole life." I said, "Thank you very much. You're very kind." Sweet little guys. Next stop in the afternoon was also in Ferrol, and we had to do some modernistas buildings. So apparently these buildings are very famous for their, I suppose, ornate exteriors and their highly colourful exteriors. So I did find that quite challenging because you're literally sitting there in the street and you have to get them perfect. All those circles, all those bits of wrought iron. But I got them out in the end, and even though I might not have chosen those two colours together, it was grand. The next morning we ended up in a place called Playa de la Madalena, and it's in a place called Cabanas. Absolutely fabulous beach, the snow white sand and the strip of blue stretching out in front of me, and I made myself comfortable under this pine tree. The light on the tree, on the trunk of the tree, was just to die for. So I did my best to capture that and got a bit of a close-up here of the little kids sailing their optimists on the bay. The deep, deep shadows and the lightly treated watercolour on the trunk made me really capture the light how I wanted to. Well, we all had that afternoon off, and it was a gorgeous sunny day, so we went to the beach. It was quite late by the time we got there after a very late and leisurely meal. I love drawing on the beach because it really is the free life drawing class that anyone can attend, and nobody pays the blindest bit of notice to someone with a sketch pad because everybody's just doing their own thing. Now, because it was still pandemic times, there was only Spanish people around, and they weren't shouting rock, paper, scissors in English, but they were doing something similar in Spanish. There was men, there was a man throwing his baby up in the air, and there was, this little cutie complaining to her dad and mom about something, I don't know, her brother had done or something. I just love drawing people on the beach. Next day we were off to Betanzos, further along the Camino Ingles. We're about halfway through the week at this stage. When we got to Betanzos, this is the puente, the bridge leading into the town, and just on the right of the bridge you can just about make out the entrance into the town. The front of the town consists of all these buildings, of course, with the typical gallerias, once again sent to try me. And what was more trying still was the fact that the level of the water changed so fast. It was dropping at a rate of knots, and it was all I could do to get the reflections in as fast as I could. I loved the colour of the roofs, and it was all in all a very, very pleasant little scene to sketch because all those buildings, all those lines made my job a lot easier. Pushing our way into Betanzos, into the town itself for the afternoon, and this is called the Iglesia de Santo Domingo, and it's in Betanzos. Now, it was a bit tragic here what happened to me because I just settled down and started drawing. I had the whole thing drawn in and it was going really well. And then the cameraman for the day came over to me and he was like, "Oh, Roisin, listen, do you mind just coming with me? We need to do half an hour shooting down by the bridge from where you were sketching in the morning." I was like, yeah, no problem, sure. And I carefully made sure that I wasn't going to be in the hot sun, but I said, no, it'll be grand. I came back and of course the sun had moved around and I was in full sunshine and I absolutely roasted. And I probably would have cooked to death only for the fact that I had a flask of water with me, which I promptly poured over my head and was able to stay alive that way. But it was just one of those really nice places to sketch. The palette was very limited, just the orange roofs and the brown buildings, the brown stone, slightly brown stone, and then all the green of the foliage that was littered around the place. Well, the next day we went to a town called Siguero, which has this lovely parque, this lovely park on the Camino, and you can just see that little pilgrim trotting along on the top of the brow of the hill there with his palo, his stick. In the foreground is Gemma, so I'd asked her to pose for me because it's always nice to get a little bit of a human into the scene to give you a sense of scale. I really enjoyed drawing the scene in the park with the reflections in the river and the little stream that ran through it and all that green. I mean, Galicia is really green anyway, but the places we stopped and drew and sketched and painted, they were just gorgeous, all of them. In the morning we'd had a little coffee with the mayor of the town or a politician of some sort, I don't know, but it was a real cultural kind of a Spanish thing. I suppose we were being funded by the Ayuntamiento of Galicia, so they had to see that, the money was being spent well and sensibly on artists like me. That afternoon was one of my favourite stops. This is a place called Bruma, and we drove through cornfields and so on to get to this little church, and it was at the top of a tiny little side road, and if you went down the side road a couple of 100 feet you came to one of those typical Camino Inglés hostels where you can stay for like €1 a night or something like that. Now, I was in a big panic when I saw this church because I figured, I've got to capture that light, I've got to capture the way the sun is dappled across the front of the building through the chestnut trees. But the funny thing was the sun didn't move at all. I could have spent ages doing the shadows, but I was happy the way I caught the light anyway, and I like the way it's across the green door. I think it looks nice. Gorgeous little building. The funny thing was I took my life in my hands sitting where I was sitting because these guys in like little vans would come tearing around the corner and throwing gravel up at me, and I'd have to sort of dart back into the ditch every time someone passed. But it was very, very quiet. It was lovely. And now for the pièce de résistance. For our last day, we were told we were to draw the Cathedral de Santiago. And I was like, what? Draw that? Are you absolutely mad? But there you go. We had no choice. We had to draw it. And when I say we, I mean myself and Maru, my fellow artist. And we had a guy with a camera again behind our back. And this time, the rest of the crew from the Ayuntamiento, the mayor's office, they were all there. So like literally I had to draw this incredibly difficult and complex scene with just the world and his dog behind me. So I decided, okay, look, you know, you got to do it. You've got these people with cameras. You've got to just, you know, do it. Don't worry about the fiddly bits. But of course, the Cathedral isn't the Cathedral without the fiddly bits. So I went for my technique that I've discussed a few times in class, where you just, well, it's something I must discuss in class more. I might even do this subject in class one of the days. I know it looks crazy difficult, but it's actually not that bad. It's to do with sort of scribbling, okay? I can't really describe it much more than that without actually doing it in front of you. But the sky was very overcast. It was just one of these white featureless skies. So I sort of silhouetted the building on the top half and worked my way downwards and allowed there to be a little bit more detail as I worked my way downwards. The windows were, again, dark green. There's that mare with the dark green paint shop at work again. The windows were dark green and they were all had, you know, mullions, dark green mullions, creating a grid across the window surfaces. They were actually very nice to draw. I just did a kind of a dark bluey green treatment for those windows. It was a fun place to sketch. As you might know, the Cathedral in Santiago de Compostela is the final stop on your trek along the Camino. So there was loads of exhausted pilgrims writing. I mean, who writes nowadays, you know, longhand in a notebook? But a lot of them were writing thoughtfully. I saw a bridal couple, the girl in the white dress, the fella in his black suit, the girl with a bunch of flowers, and they were standing there getting married by the official, and they were wearing their rucksacks on their backs to symbolise the fact that they had, I don't know, met on the Camino perhaps, I'm not sure. But it was lovely to see it. There was a lot of people who were just not moving. There were a lot of people taking selfies. And there were a lot of people asking strangers to take pictures of them jumping with their hands in the air or throwing their rucksacks up, or, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. And there was some passers-by who were being asked to take loads and loads and loads of selfies because the jump wasn't quite right, which I thought was kind of funny. If you make your way just around the corner, you come to the Plaza de la Quintana of Santiago de Compostela. Now, this is the entrance to the Puerta Santa, to the Holy Door. And normally this is absolutely mobbed. And in fact, it was mobbed, but I'm sure it was much worse in times of more tourism, because we still weren't back to normal. I mean, the pandemic was kind of winding down, but the numbers still weren't up to normal. So there you go. That's the very last of my pictures of the Camino Inglés, and I just really loved it. It's nothing like getting away for a week to do some solid work that entails an awful lot of drawing, an awful lot of painting, but an awful lot of relaxing and eating good food in good company as well. Well, I'd like to extend warm thanks to Turismo de Galicia. Muchas gracias a vosotros todos. And of course, above all, to Gemma Cesar for her kindness and her invitation in the first place. Thank you so much, Gemma. Muchas gracias a ti también. But wait, don't go anywhere. I just have to prove to you that I really was there. So I'm going to show you a few shots of Galicia. I hope you enjoy them.